Okay, thanks everyone for being here. Today's session is episode 3 of the series and it's called Weeks to Hours. So let's get straight into it. I'd like to start with the number 15,384. That's how many marketing technology tools exist today. And your team has what? 12, 15, 20, CMS, DAM, project management, AI, writing assistant, review platform, maybe 2 review platforms because the first one didn't work so well. 62% of companies added tools in the last 2 years, and you probably did too. And the pitch was always the same. This will make your team faster. So, did it? Gartner tracks how much of the marketing tech stack companies actually use. In 2020, it was 58%. By 2022, it had dropped to 42%. And the most recent number, just 33%. You're using a third of what you're paying for. More tools, less capability used. The line is going in the wrong direction. And yet, 96% of marketers describe their tech stack as successful, even though they're only using 33% of it. It's the same pattern we saw in episode 2. 80% of people think that they write good briefs, but only 10% of the people working from those briefs agree. And the next number? 60%. Knowledge workers spend 60% of their time on what researchers call work about work. Not creating, not writing, not designing, but communicating about work, searching for information, switching between apps, chasing the status of things. 6 out of every 10 minutes. And if you run the maths, that means 10 people with 60% overhead, that's 6 full-time equivalents doing nothing but coordination. Not because they're inefficient, but because the system demands it. So where does that 60% live? Not inside any tool. There's no coordination overhead report in your CMS. There's no context loss metric in your project management tool. It lives in the spaces between tools, the Slack threads, the status meetings that exist because no system can answer, where is this piece right now? And every one of these moments has a cost. Research from Catalog and Cornell found it takes 9.5 minutes to restore productive flow after switching. That's not seconds, it's minutes. Your team switches apps about 33 times a day. So has anyone seen the updated brief in Slack isn't a 10-second interruption. It's a 10-minute recovery cycle for everyone who reads it. Not because anyone is bad at their job, but because the workflow keeps pulling them out of it. Now you might be thinking, okay, but AI is fixing this. 90% of marketing teams now use AI agents somewhere in the stack, but the data should still give us pause. 49% of content professionals, that's nearly half, say they spend the same or more time on content after adopting AI. AI is brilliant at generating content, but if the workflow between brief and draft and review and publish is broken, all AI does is produce content faster that still takes 2 weeks to ship. As one analyst put it, AI didn't break our productivity, it exposed how fragmented our systems actually are. And the problem was never your tools. Your CMS is fine, your AI writing assistant is fine. The problem is the tax you pay in the spaces between them, the context that evaporates at every handoff, the tribal knowledge that became the integration layer nobody budgeted for. I call it the workflow tax. Every new tool creates a new gap. Every gap gets filled by a person. Robert Rose at the Content Marketing Institute put it simply. Content operations is everyone following their own playbook. Content orchestration is everyone following the same playbook. Most content teams are stuck in operations, managing 12 tools well in isolation, while the workflow between them runs on Slack and institutional memory. Think about a relay race. 4 world-class sprinters, each one can run their leg in under 10 seconds, but the race isn't won in the sprinting, it's won or lost in the handoff zone. Drop the baton, and it doesn't matter how fast anyone ran. The baton is the context. The handoff zone is the space between your tools. You've hired great sprinters, you've given them great shoes, but nobody's practiced the handoff. Scott Brinker asks, will there be one conductor that sees across the entire orchestra? Right now, in most content teams, there is no conductor. Every instrument plays well, but nobody's reading from the same score. And when you see it this way, some things follow. First, stop evaluating new tools. Start evaluating how your current tools connect. You're using 33% of what you already have. Extract that value before adding more. Second, start measuring what happens between tools. Time to publish from brief to approval to live. Handoff delays, context re-entry, how often someone has to re-explain something the system should already know. These are the metrics that reveal the tax. Third, the onboarding test. If a new person joins your team and you can't figure out the workflow from the system itself, if they need a veteran to explain how things actually work here, your workflow isn't connected. So let's make this concrete. A content team, good tools, good people producing a campaign landing page. The brief gets written in the project management tool, target audience, brand voice, success criteria, it's all there. It's a solid brief. The writer opens the AI writing assistant, pastes in the brief, and gets a draft in minutes. But which brand voice guidelines did the AI use? Last quarter's refresh or the ones before? Did the writer include the messaging hierarchy or just the brief? Some context made the trip, but some didn't. Draft goes to review. The reviewer doesn't have the original brief side by side. Reviews it against their own understanding, not what was specified. 2 review cycles later it ships, but does it match the success criteria from the original brief? And nobody checks because the brief is 3 weeks ago. Now, the same team, same tools, but with an orchestration layer. The brief's context flows into the draft. The draft references the brief's criteria, one version, one place to look. Where is this piece is answered by the system, not by someone in Slack. No new tools are purchased and nobody is hired. The only change was where the context survived the journey or evaporated at every handoff. That's the shift, and there are 2 ways to get there. There's the DIY path. You can vibe code it yourself. Any marketer fluent in Claude code can do this. Brief in Notion triggers a draft route to review in Slack, pushes to your CMS. It works, but these systems grow. You add a rule, a trigger, another integration, and when something breaks, an API change, a bug, a routing conflict, the marketing team can't fix it. It sits broken until an engineer has time. You've traded one gap for another. Now, some of you are thinking, what about tools for managing reviews, creative ops, and workflows? They're good at what they do, but they still manage one stage. The brief's intent doesn't travel with the content from one platform to the next. Someone still copies it across manually. Think of them as islands with no ferry connection. You can get there, but you're still rowing every time. Wawa goes deeper into this in episode 4. And then there's the done-for-you path. And this is what we've been building with Protégé. After thousands of production cycles, I kept seeing the same thing. Great inputs going in, context disappearing between stages. Brand DNA from episode 1 fixes the voice. Brief builder from episode 2 fixes the strategy. But if context evaporates between the tools, you fixed the inputs and lost the value in transit. What I've learned, when the brief's intent travels with the content through every stage, revision cycles collapse, not because any single tool got faster, but because the gaps disappeared. And here's what changes. There's the before, context re-entered manually at every handoff, and of course the after, context preserved from brief through publish. Another before, where is this piece, requires 3 Slack messages, and after, the system just knows. There's the before, every new team member spends weeks learning the unwritten rules, and the after, the workflow teaches itself. So there are 3 things you can do this week. 1, count your tools, not just the ones you pay for. Include Slack, email, shared drives, the spreadsheets that track what no tool tracks. Every item that doesn't talk to the others is a gap filled by a person. 2, the handoff audit. Pick one piece of content from last month. Trace its journey from brief to publish. At every handoff, did the context travel or did someone need to re-enter it? And 3, measure time to publish for 2 weeks, from brief to approval to live. That single number tells you more about your workflow tax than any dashboard tool ever will. We've put together a workflow tax calculator you can use right after the session. Plug in your team size, your tool count, and your coordination hours, and it'll show you exactly how many FTE equivalents and dollars you're losing. If you want help, we're offering a content workflow diagnostic. We'll walk through your pipeline end to end and show you where context is leaking. No demo, no platform tour, a diagnostic. The link should be on the screen. And of course, we all want to ship content faster, but we've been solving a workflow problem by buying tools. What if we connected what we already have? Measure the spaces between your tools, trace where context disappears, stop building islands and building bridges. You've been paying a tax you never agreed to. 60% of your team's time on moving work between disconnected tools. The fix isn't another tool, it's the workflow. Robert Rose said it. 2026 isn't the year to do more, it's the year to build what's next. So thanks everyone, and if you're following the series, please do subscribe for episode 4, the alternative to point tools. So let me have a look at some of the questions that we've got here. I'm curious about the AI stat, 47% seeing no speed improvement. Is that because they're using AI wrong, or is it a workflow problem? That comes from Amy. Amy, that will, as I've tried to explain, that will definitely be a workflow problem, and it's definitely happening in that handover between the two different technologies and that loss of context as we describe it. So it's a question of having a look at the workflow overall, but also having a look at the technologies that are connected in between those. Here is another one. This is from Dylan. You talked about the onboarding test. We just hired 2 new content people, and it took them 3 weeks to really understand our workflow. Is that normal, or is it a red flag? Unfortunately, 6 weeks of ramp up is common, and that's the problem. These 6 weeks typically are where your new hires are learning the unwritten integration layer, which is really the Slack channel and the informal communications and the unwritten knowledge that sits within those team members. In a connected workflow, the system will teach the process, and the new hires will follow the same path as everyone else, because the workflow is the system. It's not that tribal knowledge that sits within the teams and sits informally amongst the team. So yes, I'm afraid that's fairly standard. I think I can probably take one more question. Okay, so we're a pretty small team, only 5 people. Or is this more of a scale problem? Samuel, that problem will apply regardless of your team size. It may be slightly more or slightly less, but the dynamic within that team will be the same. There may be some slightly more easy communication between your team because they may well be sitting in the same space. But regarding the technology, regarding the handovers, regarding that loss of context at each of those stages, the dynamic will remain almost exactly the same. So you may see some slightly different timeframes. It might be more, it might be less, but because the dynamic is the same, it's likely to be exactly the same problem. Okay, I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you, everybody. Please do subscribe to the 4th session that's coming up. And as I mentioned, that is the alternative to point tools, which I think will be particularly interesting. So thank you.